Hello and welcome to iGCSE Success. And if you're new here, a big hello to you. I'm an English teacher and I post content here on YouTube to prepare students for their Cambridge First Language English exam. And you know how it goes. If that sounds interesting to you, be sure to check out the videos on my channel because I break down a number of the core skills needed to succeed with First Language English. So if you've seen my past two videos, you'll know that I've been doing another mini series looking at the writer's effect question, except there's one difference. I've been looking at one of the May-June 2020 series. Really need to stop doing that voice. I don't know why I do it. So if you've not seen those videos, be sure to check them out. I will put the links in the description box below, plus the Google Drive, which I have previously shared with the most recent FLE papers. So today's video, part 3, will be showing you how to structure a response to the writer's effect question. And be sure to check out my previous videos on the writer's effect, where I break down the 5 steps that I advise my students to use. Otherwise, it might not make much sense. So let's get straight to the video. Hi everyone, so this is part 3, which concludes my mini-series of looking at a writer's effect question from one of the 2020 May-June series. Please do watch part 1 and part 2 just so you have a little bit of context and you have some understanding as to what the fiction piece is about. However, with that said, if you are simply looking for how to structure your writer's effect response in the most effective way, then this video will no doubt be useful. And if you see my previous videos, you know that I advise my students to use the 5-step method. 5 easy steps to ensure that you include everything you need to and that your response is clear and succinct. So step 1, of course, is establishing what the overall effect of the language is, what the writer is trying to achieve. Step 2 is using some sort of transition phrase, so the writer begins by. Step 3 is using your first quotation and embedding that quotation well. Step 4 is using the zoom in technique. And step 5, of course, the most important part is where you carry out your analysis of whatever image you have selected. And quite simply, you just repeat steps 2 to 5 for your second quotation and 2 to 5 for your last quotation. And you do exactly the same process for your second paragraph you are directed to. So let's take a look at this paragraph. The phrases, the words in bold, are the sort of phrases you want to have in your own writer's effect responses, and that will ensure that you have this sort of well-structured and organized response. So, the overall effect of the language creates an image of that is not going to change. The narrator feeling both isolated and threatened as a result of his unfamiliar surroundings. So that is step 1. Moving on to step 2, the writer begins by. And although the paragraphs are often short, I advise my students to try and select something from the beginning, something from the middle, and something from the end. So you don't want all your images to be, clumped together or all from the sort of beginning part of the text. So the writer begins by describing the narrator being lost in the shadows of the shelves. So that is our embedded quotation, which instantly emphasizes the size of the bookstore. The writer's use of the verb, so we are using the zoom in technique, lost, makes it seem as though the narrator is almost disorientated and is going to struggle to find his way out. Now, if you pay attention to that quote which I've used, lost in the shadows of the shelves, actually there are 2 words which are quite powerful. Okay, so I really want to comment on the verb lost and the noun shadow. So if you find yourself in this situation, quite simply use the connective furthermore and then zooming again. Furthermore, the noun shadows connotes a sense of evil. It's almost as if something malevolent is hiding in the darkness. Notice my phrasing, it's almost as if we are simply making suggestions, not assertions. The writer then goes on to describe, so this is our next transition phrase, and we are going to use our second quotation. The narrator feeling as though he's left the surface of his planet. Of course, the square brackets signalling that I've changed something to do with the sentence. In this case, it's the pronoun. The writer's use of imagery here is particularly striking as it emphasizes how unfamiliar his surroundings are and out of place the narrator feels. There's also a sense of how anxious he feels due to being so high up, so much so that it feels like he's in outer space. So of course that's where really we will get our marks from. That's our analysis, if you like, the nuts and bolts of our response. Sorry, I will just put this in bold as well, so the writer's use of imagery. If you want to simply not zoom into a particular word, you want to strike the right balance, you can just simply put the writer's use of imagery if you want to analyze the image in its entirety. Notice as well my phrasing here is particularly striking. When you start saying things like this is powerful, this is effective, it gives your response an evaluative voice. And that's really, really quite important. So you are commenting on how effective you think the writer has achieved whatever the overall effect is. And then of course we go on to use our last transition phrase, and that is simply, lastly the writer goes on to describe the books huddling together. Again, if you see my previous videos, I do recommend that you get into the habit of using what we call literary present. So that might take a bit of practice actually. It just means that our verb tenses need to be changed if they are in the past to the present, because we want to treat literature as if it's happening in the now. Okay? The writer's use of the verb here is particularly interesting. So I've used the adjective interesting, I've used striking already, as it seems to create an image of the books wanting to protect each other, as if they are also frightened of the darkness that seems to be shrouding the bookstore. And that is our first paragraph. Okay, so I won't explicitly go through the steps again, but just keep in your mind the steps that I am using, the 5 steps, but I'm just going to quickly read the paragraph. The overall effect of the language creates an image of the bookstore having the power to transport the narrator to somewhere seemingly otherworldly. What I will say is that your overall effect will always be different, and you need to think carefully about what the writer is trying to achieve. The writer begins by describing the bookstore as being absurdly narrow and dizzyingly tall. The writer's use of imagery here highlights how impractical the bookstore is in terms of being able to navigate easily. Furthermore, it creates a sense of the environment being almost like a labyrinth. It could be said that the bookstore is perhaps trying to trap the narrator or keep him from finding something valuable. Now I want to draw your attention to how I've explored different layers of meaning. Okay, that is how you are going to get your marks. Okay, do not just give one interpretation. I would be inclined to give a couple at least. Okay, use furthermore to develop your analysis. The writer then goes on to describe the narrator feeling as though he is standing at the border of a forest. Ellipsis there, just to show that I've omitted some of the quotation, full of wolves and witches. The writer's use of powerful imagery here, notice the adjective powerful to create that evaluative voice, here shows the magical power of the bookstore, the ability to momentarily transport the narrator to a new world where the unimaginable can happen. Our last step. Lastly, the writer goes on to describe the ladders as stretching up ominously into the gloom. The writer's use of the noun gloom is particularly effective as it seems to be symbolic of some evil lair. It's clear to see that the higher the narrator ventures, the more sinister and dangerous the imagery becomes. The last thing I will say is that you want to try and impress Cambridge, and you want to try and show that you have a good grasp of how writers use language for effect. So it's about striking the right balance. Yes, the primary focus is imagery, but there's no reason why you cannot explore those images, but also zoom into some of the powerful word choices which are used. That's all for today, guys. I hope this video has helped. Don't forget to like and subscribe, comments down below, and I will see you very soon. Until next time, bye-bye.